Hello again, and welcome to Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy. I'm your host, certified sex therapist Laurie Watson, author of Wanting Sex Again, and blogger at Psychology Today and WebMD. And I have with me Dr. Adam Matthews, my co-host, who's a couples therapist, psychotherapist, and president of NCAMFT. Foreplay is dedicated to helping couples keep it hot. Thanks for listening. Now on to today's topic. Hey, Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy. We are sponsored today by Crated with Love. It's a date night subscription box that helps couples strengthen their relationship with monthly games, activities, and challenges, and it's delivered right to your door.
And we see so many couples who need ideas for date nights, right? So this is a perfect resource for them.
Yeah, and I love the little box it comes in. It's very creative.
I love it. And it's Mother's Day.
I know.
Right? Already?
I know. This is what you can get your wife for Mother's Day.
I could get my wife this for Mother's Day.
Might be more of a gift for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's for both of us. But are your boys going to do anything special for you? Do they get into Mother's Day? Do they treat you well for Mother's Day?
They are learning to do that still.
Oh, dudes, get on it. What is happening? Do they not good dinners, good gifts?
Well,
what is happening?
We're actually going to my favorite cafe, but that was my own reservation.
They paid it for you. They at least get you the card, right?
They get me the card. Yeah.
Now, see, they're adults. They should be able to do that. With my kids my age, I have to go out and buy the gifts from the kids for them.
You're training them.
Yeah, but now they're starting to want to have opinions about the gifts and costing me even more money because they want to pick out the diamond earrings and necklaces.
Cool. I love your kids.
I know, right? They're big spenders of my money, right?
Adam, it's Mother's Day. Come on.
All right,
your generous heart.
She deserves all of it, all the money.
You know what? So I was interviewed this week by Time Magazine, and one of the things that they were talking about was this study, speaking of mothers and fathers and the ways families are set up. Mm-hmm. Basically, there was this study that was done about families, and the outcome was that traditional family structures, where the man does the manly things and the woman does the feminine things, apparently, that they have more sexual frequency.
So, wait, let me make sure I understand this. So you're talking about like traditional roles as like 50s,
yes,
old school Donna Reed, like Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, and it was, the study was published like in 2013, and the interviewer was saying, is this true? Do you find this in your couples that the more traditional relationship actually has more sexual frequency?
So you mean the Beaver's parents were getting it on a lot? Is that what you're saying?
That's what they were saying.
Why does that happen? Why is that attractive? What does that make?
Well, I mean,
more
the fear is, right? Like, I mean, I actually think my husband doing the dishes is incredibly sexy,
Yeah.
Yay, that. But the fear, I think, as we read that and thought about it was, okay, does this mean that there really is some sort of sexual piece about gender roles that turns people on more? And it turns out that the data needed to be reanalyzed. It was based,
not true.
No, it was based on old data. And this was before dual careers, basically. And so with dual careers, we have found that, in fact, divided responsibilities increases attraction. And when couples share childcare as well, that increases sexual satisfaction. So it's actually the sharing of the load. And, I mean, that makes sense to me because what's fair, and when we feel like our partner is fair to us, I mean, that makes us feel better about the relationship. And when there's good feelings, we want to be more sexual.
Yeah, but that seems to be a thing that gets couples out of whack, though, a lot of times, is that they do not think it's fair. Like that division. Like, how many couples do you hear that says, I do way more of the household chores than my partner does?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that to me, that is just one thing that I hear so often is just this inequity in the relationship. That if one person is complaining that they do more of the household chores, the other one is complaining that they work harder or that their job requires more hours. Like there is,
they make more of a financial commitment.
Yeah, and there doesn't seem to be, and they're also thinking that they do contribute, right? The person that says that they're bringing more of a financial contribution still says, I still help out around the house, right?
Yeah. And I used to have it on my forms. On my forms, people had to write out the division of household labor, because I think it is such a point of contention. I've often said that resentment is the monster under the bed. I mean, if you feel resentful with your partner, I mean, it really kills sexual desire.
Yeah. And it's hard to reconcile that, right? Because it's hard for you to see. I think we all are the heroes of our own story,
Absolutely.
right? And so
Absolutely.
we all like try to figure out, like, believe that we are doing the best that we possibly can, and we couldn't do one thing more. And if you don't recognize all the effort that I'm making, then like you obviously don't care about me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is. That dynamic gets so ingrained in us because it's so hard to take the other person's point of view that I just think, man, that effort, my wife should notice. I did the dishes last night. Why is she not just jumping my bones after I did the dishes? That is so confusing. Or I took out the trash, or like I did something, as opposed to my wife going, why do you need recognition for just making sure our house is free of garbage?
I will say that, this is a game my husband and I have done pretty well on.
Oh, yeah?
Like when we clean the toilet, we bring the other person over and say, look, it's clean. And the other one is like, oh, that's so awesome.
So
did you see the lawn that I mowed? I'm like, that is so awesome.
So you stage a party every time you do a chore. That's some good motivation.
I will, people get so hung up on this, and it is such a power struggle. They want to say, well, what you're doing is not as important, or you're not doing it fast enough, or you're not doing enough, or
the right way. You're not doing it the right way.
Exactly. I mean, it is just really another area that people struggle in. I think about this in three pots. So there's the financial commitment and bringing in the money. There's also the childcare, which is enormous. And then there's household management. And all three of those areas take a huge effort.
Yeah.
And people have different standards, too, about what's acceptable, and everything from what's acceptable to our economy to what's acceptable in terms of the dust bunnies under the table,
Yeah, and doling that out becomes like how you manage that becomes the fight, right?
Yeah.
Because you want it to be at a certain standard, right? And if the other person is not living up to what you see as the standard, right, all of a sudden it's inequitable and it's not fair, right? And that comes out in people's sex life as well, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
Because I think that this resentment builds up, and then they're supposed to somehow or another come together, lay that all aside, and be hot in bed. And they're thinking, I just had a fight with you about, you yelling at me about the work I did do or didn't do. I mean, it's really stressful.
Yeah. Well, and I think sex is supposed to be something that's equitable in concept, right? It's something that's supposed to be mutual, something that's supposed to be shared. And so if I don't feel like my partner is being mutual in these other areas, how am I going to feel like they're being mutual in the bedroom?
Right. And I think some people get really hung up about mutuality. It's, okay, you have to initiate as often as I do. Right? You don't initiate as often as I do. It should be 50-50. I'm like, ooh, that's a formula for very little sex.
This is something that we call in couples therapy. We call it the tit for tat or quid pro quo. Like,
I'm glad you straightened that out. Yes,
like tit for tat.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. That's let's go with quid pro quo to help the innuendo there. But the quid pro quo just means it's we're keeping everything on a scale.
Something for something.
Yeah, I do something, you do something, and I'm keeping track of that. Also, you could think about it in terms of scorekeeping.
Yeah.
Right. We're keeping track of how much I did versus how much you did, and if I am winning, right, I've done more than you, but I'm always.
But somehow or
winning.
another, winning means losing.
Yeah, there's always. Yeah.
If I'm ahead, I'm actually behind. I think that we have to do things out of our heart, and we have to believe our partner is doing the very best they can. I mean, there are sometimes inequities that have to be addressed. I have certainly had patients who come home, stay home, do nothing, and it has to be addressed. But overall, with good people, they're both doing the best they can. They may have different energy levels. Yeah. They may feel differently about how much energy needs to go into which bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I love about this whole conversation is if people don't address this, right, if they continue in a scorecard, who's winning, who's losing type of mentality, like this is going to escalate, and they're going to end up in some major fights that have a really simple solution.
Exactly.
Right? And they're going to feel like their marriage is falling apart. I have so many couples they come in and they are questioning the stability of their relationship, and when we get right down to it, like this is what they're doing. Right?
Yeah.
They're arguing, they're in a quid pro quo scorekeeping type of relationship over something that sometimes is as simple as the chores in the household.
Exactly. I mean, if they were living alone or when their partner travels, somehow or another it all gets done.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
The children get fed, the laundry's done. But somehow or another it's the race of, okay, I did a little bit more than you did. And there's these creeping feelings of resentment. I mean, gosh, being committed is hard.
Oh, sure.
There's a lot at stake, and you would think that there's two people, plowing through all this work together, but instead it's like they're fighting each other and trying to figure it out, who's doing more.
Yeah. So we got practical tips.
Yeah, we got some tips.
All right. So we're going to come back.
It.
We're going to come back after the break. We're going to be solving things left and right, man. It's going to be great.
Keep those buckets empty or full.
That's right. We'll be back after a bit.
Thank you so much to all our Patreon supporters, right?
Yeah. Patreon is a platform where you can directly support things that you love. We really want to expand the resources that we can be able to provide to you as our listeners.
If, our work touches you and our work helps you, we would be so grateful for your support. Just go to our website, foreplayrst.com, and there you can find a way to support us, and you can see our episodes and our blogs. And thank you so much, guys.
Speaking with certified sex therapist Laurie Watson from Awakening Center for Couples and Intimacy. Laurie, what is an intensive?
So an intensive is 12 to 14 hours of therapy all in one weekend. And it's a way to really make fast progress compared to weekly therapy. I mean, there's just so much more you can get done when you have a chunk of time.
Overcome the challenges in your relationship and your sex life. Learn more about intensives and Awakening Center's other services at awakenloveandsex.com.
At Matthews Counseling, we believe it is our job to come alongside you in whatever difficult challenges of life you are in and help you rediscover hope and to find the strength that you have to face those challenges. We strive to create a safe and comfortable place for you to explore who you want to be and identify the obstacles standing in your way. Oftentimes, the first step toward finding help is the hardest, but it can also be the bravest. Give us a call at 919-587-8018. Find us online at matthewscounseling.net. We look forward to working with you.
Hey, we're back with Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy, and you may have noticed we have some cool new tunes.
Some new music, yes.
Yes.
The jam too.
And we have a cool new producer named Lauren, who is really helping us.
Listen, man, we're
line.
official, we're polished. As George Jefferson said, we're moving on up, man.
Yeah, we are, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so we're back to some practical tips on how to keep this thing balanced.
Yeah. What you got? What's your practical tip that you offer people?
I think that the first thing is, how do you decide on what's acceptable? Because some couples say, it's only acceptable if we each bring in the same amount of money, or it's only acceptable if we each spend the same amount of minutes in terms of our work. I know a young couple recently who I thought really did it well. Mm-hmm. She said to him, so what do you hate doing? And he said, I hate to grocery shop. And she said, great, I love to grocery shop. It takes me an hour and a half. What are you going to do? Mm. And he's like, gosh, I guess I'll be doing the bathrooms and the vacuuming, and the floors in that hour and a half, which is about what it took. And then the other thing that they decided on was both of them made the meals. They both planned the meals, and they both did the meal cleanup together afterwards.
Yeah. See,
so I'm like, that is super smart.
Yeah. What I love about that is they had a conversation about it.
Yeah.
I run into a lot of couples who just do not have a conversation about it. And it's a simple conversation. How are we going to divide the chores? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What are we going to do together?
Yeah.
Right. And I think those things become such it's a simple solution, but it can get you really big gains as far as this issue goes.
Right. I also think, sometimes there's a discussion about money. What kind of lifestyle do we want? Mm-hmm. I think that's really important to decide early on. Or maybe there's a job loss or something and they need to decide later. Mm-hmm. Okay, what are we going to do? What's important to us? Is time more important to us than money? How do we decide how we contribute?
I think a really helpful, when it comes to money and that division, like a really helpful conversation point is, what's the amount that it's okay that I spend without consulting you?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I think
too.
that is just a basic one. What do we say is okay? Is it $200? Is it $100? Is it $200? Is it more than that? Where I don't have I can spend it without having to talk to you about it, because then that just clears up a whole bunch of stuff.
And I think on the flip side, Adam, is couples need to decide together how much they're going to save. Because sometimes one person's a real saver and they put away a ton of money, and the other person is like, I'd rather feather the nest a little bit more.
See?
That's the spend issue.
That's the spend issue. See, in my household, I'm the spender.
You're the spender?
I am the impulse buyer, man.
Oh, you're the coffee man.
I'm the guy. I did not buy
How much money do you spend
today.
a month on coffee?
That's something. I mean, some things are really private, Laurie, and are things that should not be shared with the general public or my wife. So let's just say I like
Enough.
it.
Coffee is Adam's love language. I've decided.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
It is. It's totally my love language.
I get
But
you.
I think when couples decide those things, it's just a conversation. But then you also have to stick to it. I have a lot of couples that becomes an issue as well. Over time, they stop doing what they said they were going to do.
I know it.
And so they may have to revisit that conversation. But ultimately, if I say that I'm going to be in charge of keeping the bathrooms clean, I have to keep the bathrooms clean, right? And I have to give my partner permission to call me out on that if I'm failing to do that.
So basically, we want to use the language of making a promise. First of all, having a request. Okay, what do you want to do? Then the other person makes a promise. And then if the agreement is not kept, that's when the call out comes. I think a lot of couples just assume these things and they're always mad at each other. And it's like, well, I never agreed to that. I don't really care if we vacuum every day or not.
That's right. Because it has to be explicit. If it's not explicit, if I'm just assuming that if I do the grocery shopping that you're going to do the bathrooms, we're in for a world of hurt.
Yeah.
Right?
I think there's a problem when your partner becomes a little OCD. I heard this one couple argue about it. And I finally broke it down. I'm like, well, okay, you talk a lot about washing the floor. How often do you wash the floor? And the woman said, every day. I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's like, well, we've got toddlers and there's dog hair on the floor.
See, that leads into another practical tip for me. Like in life, especially under stressful situations when there's lots of things happening, but you have to decide on what your standard is. And a lot of times we have to lower our standards for what is going to be. I think sometimes we shoot for perfectionism in a lot of these areas of our life. We want the house to always be clean.
Yeah, clean enough to be happy, dirty enough. No, wait. Clean enough to be healthy, dirty enough to be happy.
Right. Something like that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
My mother's motto.
Oh, it's your mother's motto.
But let's not go there.
Okay. We don't. See, you don't want to. I don't want to talk about my coffee addiction. You don't want to talk about your mother.
Yeah.
I understand.
It might have been a little dirtier than that.
Okay.
I'm into clean.
I gotcha. Okay.
But not so organized.
But I think that's. I have people all the time that like that won't have this standard, especially when they're raising small kids or when their jobs are stressful or when they're going through really grief and loss, or there's things that are happening like that, and they're trying to hold to these standards that are just they don't give themselves a break, right? It's a lot about grace and mercy to yourself, right? In those times.
And I do find a lot of couples who just have some difficulty organizing. They don't know how to do that. I do recommend flylady.com, just for the record. It's a great little option. She sends you 1,000 emails, so put it into a different folder. But it is an organization tool that is free and really helpful, especially to those of us who are not quite as organized. Yeah.
I mean, some people just, that doesn't bother them. Like not being organized, it does not bother them. But you have to be able to talk about that and decide what is your standard for the two of you going to be, not just trying to follow one person or the other person's standard.
So I think one helpful tip is to make the list. I mean, I often find that couples, one person is more visually oriented. My husband, he needs a list. And one of the things I've asked often in the past is just give me time. Give me 2 hours and let me kind of direct that time. I'll give you the priorities because oftentimes, he has another set of priorities, but there were seasons in our life that I was the one kind of directing the household management. So I knew what was coming, what was crucial to get done. So just asking for a gift of time and say, okay, give me 2 hours on Saturday and then the rest of the day is yours or whatever. Sometimes that helps if you can agree one person is more of the household manager. Yeah.
I also like list. And I like knowing exactly what I'm doing. So my wife oftentimes will send me in an email all the things that she'll send me the honeydew basically in an email.
Yeah, I like that.
And that just gives me some. I am visual, so I want to see what I'm supposed to do and know exactly what the expectation is. I think some couples I hear, well, he or she should just automatically know what to do. And a lot of times that just doesn't helpful. It gets lost in the shuffle. Or some people set reminders on their phone, set alarms on their phone, put it up on the fridge, anything like that puts it in front of your face about what we're trying to do together and what's the win for us as far as household management goes.
Yeah.
So, Laurie, if we figure this out and we are more equitable in our chores, our household responsibilities, how does that affect our sex life? What does that give to us?
Okay, so the good thing is resentment in the relationship goes down. I mean, most people should be able to work this out, right? This is the practical stuff of living a life. And just getting it nailed down, really important to reduce resentment and frustration in an ordinary life. With that said, I think that, resentment being low, often there is another piece that we need to work out in terms of equity in the bedroom, especially around initiation. I think that this is almost looked at as a task. Men frequently are more of the initiators, but sometimes the females as well. But if it's overbalanced one way or another, it's like, okay, my job is to start the sexual thing rolling. And what's lost is my sense of being desired. And that can be problematic too. It's another way. So I think that hormonally we really have to take into consideration that men have more testosterone. They're just prompted more internally to have sex. I think we share testosterone with initiation. I mean, I really think that I know it's not completely fair, but it's also not completely fair to live in a woman's body that takes so darn long to get going. So think of it that way. There is equity. But I think one way of sharing this can be both couples take responsibility for sort of, last week you planned the date night and this week I'm going to plan it. That's sharing in terms of keeping the relationship going, the things that we need to put in together to keep us going and keep the relationship, management going is important and can be more easily shared than maybe the sexual initiation. I also think, we got to have grace for each other, in terms of maybe your partner is overtired and they can't, mow the lawn that day, or they're overtired and it's really your turn to put the kids to bed, or they need you to do that or something. I mean, I think we really have to accommodate each other. George Eliot says, right, what do we live for except to make each other's life easier? And I like that. It's a spirit of generosity and of giving. And I think that love comes through.
Yeah.
We respond to that sexually, right? Somebody who wants
do.
to give to us.
Yeah, I think that's great. Those solutions are often the simplest, but they're often the most overlooked as well.
Yeah.
And so doing that, I think you bring that back into your relationship.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. This is Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy with your co-hosts, sex therapist Laurie Watson and couples therapist Dr. Adam Matthews.
Until next time.
You can now call in your questions to the Foreplay question voicemail. Dial 833-MY-4PLAY. That's 833-4-PLAY. And we'll use the questions for our mailbag episodes.
Hey, help us stay on top here at Foreplay. We'd love it if you would subscribe and share it with your friends. And please take 1 sec and rate and review us. Thanks so much.
All content is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for therapy by a licensed clinician or as medical advice from a doctor.